Hello and welcome to the Stop Hinkley News Rounds summary for June-July 2025. It's been a busy month. I'll try to keep it brief. Some interesting comments about the benefits or otherwise of the European pressurized water reactor. Somebody's done some interesting research on that, and in the Critic magazine, they report that EPR reactors are nearly 3 times more expensive than their predecessors. So the prospects of getting cheap electricity from them were even lower than you thought. Some bad news for us at Stop Hinkley was that in the third week in June, US private capital group Apollo agreed to set up the largest ever private credit deal with £4.5 billion of in-debt financing to support Hinkley C. That's £1.5 billion a year over 3 years is the package, and it's a borrow, but it clearly gets EDF out of a hole because I think they were struggling to convince their own government that they should be pouring money down the black hole of Hinkley C rather than building new nuclear reactors in France. The interesting local developments, of which there are several, is that the BBC reported on the 4th of July that 3 companies are facing prosecution for health and safety offences over the death of a site supervisor at Hinkley C in November 2022. And he worked for Bylaw, which is a conglomerate of the French organisation Bouygues Travaux Publics and Lang O'Rourke. So the BY comes from the French company and the LOR comes from Lang O'Rourke. And the other company notified of the prosecution is NNB Generation New Nuclear Build, which is EDF Energy in another name. And they've been very quiet about this, and sadly it's come to a prosecution. Looking elsewhere, because it created a storm in the Daily Mirror on the 5th of July, Sellafield is a safety risk because of potentially deadly nitrogen gas leaks. Now, whilst nitrogen itself isn't poisonous, elevated levels of nitrogen gas, which can cause asphyxiation at the plant's Magnox facility. So there's a lot about that and about whistleblowing at the site. Controversial month for books. There were 2 more or less anti-nuclear books published, but also a really cheery pro-nuclear book called Going Nuclear by, surprise, surprise, a nuclear chemist at the UK's National Nuclear Laboratory. So writing in his spare time, who was desperate for us to get more involved in nuclear power. So he had a little plug in The Guardian, and I'm pleased to say that shortly afterwards, The Guardian quite rightly offered a letter writer a chance to put up the case against new nuclear and nuclear power in general, under the heading, "We must count the real costs of nuclear power," which was good to see. The funding for Sizewell C staggers on with the as yet undecided final investment decision. The EDF have reduced their commitment to what's meant to be another flagship build in the UK of Sizewell C in Suffolk from a lot down to the last we heard was 16, and now it's 12.5%. And sadly, Centrica, British Gas as was, are now putting up 15%. And we have the British government currently has a share of around 47.5%, but nothing's terribly clear because people were desperate, the people involved, not us, were desperate for a deal to be signed before the government goes into recess Parliament goes into recess on the 21st of July. And there was expectation that when President Macron was here earlier in July, that there'd be a lot of handshaking and paper signing to actually sign off between himself and Prime Minister Starmer the deal for Sizewell C, but that didn't happen. So they're still struggling. So watch this space. Perhaps by the time I come back to you, it will all have been sorted. But again, I wouldn't hold my breath. Bad news, more bad news locally, is that on the 10th of July, Somerset Live reported that there was a walkout at Hinkley C over alleged bullying by senior staff and the contractors involved, who always strike me as fairly sturdy blokes with more than a little backbone, felt sufficiently aggrieved to down tools out of their very well-paid jobs on account of the bullying that's happening. Not so good. The other points that are happening, there's a couple of political things which are more general but of interest to everyone, whether you're Stop Hinkley involved or not. One is that Reform UK are now up on their hind legs about how the ambitions for net zero that the government holds are a lunacy that destroys jobs, drive up energy bills, and is responsible for the deindustrialising of Britain. And that, of course, was their esteemed leader, Nigel Farage. So you believe what you like. The government, on the other hand, is busy pumping money into the county in question, Lincolnshire, do all sorts of things for the Green Revolution. And the last point I've got to make is that the 14th of July, the Telegraph pointed out that Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, claims that the British way of life is under threat because of climate change. And those who oppose Labour's approach to green policy would be betraying future generations by their inaction. And he said that, of course, in response to the Met Office pointing out that Britain has had twice as many extremely hot days a year in the 21st century compared to what it did at the end of the 20th century, and that extremely cold nights are now almost unheard of. And that's it, really. Watch this space. A couple of really local interest things are that fly parking around here, and I live close to Hinkley Point C, is now at such a pitch that the private landowners are charging Hinkley C workers who could park for free at a park and ride, but who are desperate to park just outside the site, is charging them a car parking rate, and then they are walking along a busy little road to Hinkley C at night, for which EDF is supplying them with protective clothing. Interesting. Sort of not approving of it, but supporting workers who do use it seems to be EDF's stance. And forewarned is forearmed. It's highly likely that belatedly, and with all sorts of fudges and spin around why it's late, but other things are still ahead of schedule, it's highly likely that the Unit 2 dome lift will happen in the next few days. So be prepared for a lot of trumpeting about how wonderfully EDF are doing, when in fact it's nothing of the kind. Okay, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the summer without getting too hot. Bye for now.